Thank you, Stuart. I did my own illustration for change too, sorry. It's not anything against the other illustration, it's just that this one is very specific to my needs, and it'll all make sense in a little bit. So hi, everybody. There are so many of you here that it's freaking me out. I'm Linda. This is my Twitter handle, and this is my Twitter picture. I'm just like really excited to be here because a few years ago I was attending Creative Mornings in Atlanta, and the idea of speaking at one of these things scared me, and I remember sitting all the way in the back and thinking like, there's no way I could ever do that, or like there's no way that I will ever be there, and now I'm doing it, and it's just pretty cool. And I was working for MailChimp at the time, which is why I screamed when MailChimp was sponsoring. And I think the point of these things is to get everybody together. I've met a lot of people in my career through events like these, so I just want to encourage everybody to like take the opportunity to get to know each other afterwards and like meet a face that you haven't met before. It's just like the best thing that you can do in our industry. Anyways, enough about you guys. Let's talk about me for a minute. This is who I really am. There's like, I think a lot of people take themselves too seriously, and especially designers, we can be very like self-important and can kind of get caught up in things a little bit. But yeah, rule number one today is don't take yourselves too seriously. I draw stuff for a living, and it's not that big of a deal. I mean, it's awesome. It's the best thing in the world, but it's just pictures. So these are some of the places that I've worked over the last 7 years. I was very lucky to have an internship at Cartoon Network right before I graduated college. And I think that kind of helped set me up for this really fun career that's always been about bringing things to life and making things feel human. So I'll just start by like showing you some of my work that I've done in the past. This is a weird illustration that I found in my sketchbook. It's here for no reason. This is one of my favorite projects that I did while I was at MailChimp. And another one. I've dabbled with like watercolors, and I really love making icons. I also really love coffee. And I've kind of merged those things while I was at Dropbox to try to help bring illustration online in a way that makes these like really mechanical parts of our lives feel human again. This was me art directing the creation of some puppets. These are actually the co-founders of Dropbox, who were gracious enough to lend me their likenesses for a video that I was making. That was one of the most fun projects I've ever worked on. Yeah, they had no idea what they were doing when they let me do that. But it was super fun, and like I said, just never take yourselves too seriously. It's just the internet. I also did some serious work while I was at Dropbox. There was this new web app that I worked on called Paper. I was one of the first designers on the team building it, and this is just like a really early sketch file of that. But again, one of my favorite things from that project was this little guy. When the product was in alpha testing, he was there to remind you that you were under NDA and you shouldn't like spill the beans to anybody else about like what was going on. And my engineers at the time, they said that it looked like he was picking his nose. And I was like, no, he's shushing you. He's saying like it's a secret. And they were like, no, he's definitely picking his nose, Linda. So they called him Picky. And by the time I left Dropbox, they had a big launch party, and I got this picture while I was in New York from the team. They had made little Picky tattoos. This is my favorite part about what I do. When you make one weird little thing, like I made that just to make me smile. I was doing a very boring NDA onboarding flow. But I wanted to make this moment in that felt nice and that felt human. So I love it when I make these little things and people grab onto them and they just like embrace the hell out of it and end up having a lot of fun with it. I also did some other like internal illustration stuff at Dropbox. This is just one of my favorite ones because, again, coffee. But anyways, today our topic is change. It's pretty serious change. I've undergone some really serious ones in my life. I've moved a couple times, I've been married, I've been divorced, I've been through a hell of a lot. I've read a lot of self-help books, and I thought about sharing a lot of that wisdom with you guys today, but then I was just like, no. I'm just going to tell you some stories instead. So as I was thinking about this, though, I did realize that there are two types of changes. So the first type of change that there is are changes that just kind of happen. So I say when we were young, time carries us from one inevitable change to the next. So there are all these changes that just kind of happen to you. You're a little kid, you really have no control over your life. So this is me as a little kid, 1990. I bet some of you weren't even born then. This was in the middle of my first big change. My family was moving from Florida to Georgia, so that was kind of a big deal. I think I was also realizing for the first time that animals couldn't talk, very sadly. And another big change that I remember happened when I was 7. When I was 7 years old, I went to the dentist, and my dentist told me that I had to have 7 teeth pulled. And they were all the top teeth and the middle teeth. And so the kids, they called me toothless, and it was so bad. It was terrible. And since then I've read that if you have a dream that your teeth are falling out, it means that you're undergoing some big changes in your life. And that makes total sense to me because that was pretty dramatic. Some other big changes that I realized I had in my life were making and losing friends, moving, going to school, going through puberty, that's a big one, getting dumped, falling in love, crying in your mom's bed, and finally leaving home. And so after going through all of that stuff in my life, this was me. After all of that, I was a somewhat disgruntled, apparently Doritos-shaped person who was ready to make changes of my own, on my terms. I wanted to get out of the small town I was from and go become this designer person. This was the first time in my life that I put forth serious effort to change the world around me until it resembled something that I wanted. I had to pay for college. I had to have a full-time job while I was in college. It was a lot of really hard work, but I didn't want to wait tables at the country steak restaurant anymore. And so in order to do that and to become a designer, I had to force some really big changes. And luckily, that led to my job at MailChimp in 2008, which was awesome. So those are the changes that we make. And when I first got that job, I thought that I had landed in this design world. And from then on, just as it happened when I was younger, everything would just kind of start to fall into place like it did. I thought that naturally as you got older, your job title would just increase and your money would just increase. And if you wanted to move, a new office would magically open and you'd be asked to move there. But I was just so wrong. I was stuck in Georgia, you guys and girls. I started to get this feeling like I was trapped. I was just kind of where's the promises? I finally made it to this career, and I'm feeling if I don't do anything, I could just end up staying at the same company for a really long time. Or, not progressing and not getting these new job titles that I want. So I was feeling like I needed to move and was waiting for those opportunities to come, and they didn't. So I decided that I wanted to move to New York. I had to be honest with myself and realize that MailChimp isn't going to just magically open up an office in my dream city. And if I want to go there, I'm going to have to leave this job that I love and go. So I did, and it was really sad. I had been there for almost 3 years and had kind of helped build this brand that I loved and still love so much today. But I did it. I left everything. I sold all my stuff, got rid of my car, and I moved to New York. I tried that out for a couple years, and it was fun for a little while, but it was also really scary, and it was really sad sometimes, and it was also everything I hoped for most of the time. And I didn't really know what I was looking for, but I felt like I was starting to find it by challenging myself and by being in this big, scary place. And then this like really random opportunity came up to interview with Dropbox in California. And so I was like, well, I'm kind of on a roll here, making all these changes, so maybe I'll do it. I'd kind of dreamed about living in California since I was 12 because I heard about I visited once and they're like surfers, and I just like kind of loved like this cool lifestyle. But I think I had like an Orange County. Does anybody remember that show? I kind of had like that view of California. Like everyone's just hanging out, sipping margs all day, and like. So I decided to take the job at Dropbox. I didn't have any expectations really. Like I didn't really know much about tech culture or the company or anything, but I decided to just go for it. So I took that job. I flew to California the night before I was supposed to start. And then I get there on the first day with Justin, who's in the back. And this was literally our first day at work. Our first day ended up on the cover of Fast Company. Like, no pressure. There's just an article about how to land a dream job. By the way, that's you, dream job girl. Good luck not fucking that up. And I mean, like, so Tim Van Dam, he took this picture and it just kind of ended up online. And it wasn't like a huge deal or anything, but for me, this is when it all kind of set in of like what I had just gotten myself into. Like, there are so many people all around the world who would kill to be in my shoes. And that was just kind of what my life became, was my job. It was really, really, really great at first, don't get me wrong. I couldn't believe like all of the amazing people that I was meeting and working with, and like I was learning so much. But I think when you let your job become your life, it can consume you in a way where you can't help but to hear that little like, change this voice in your head. Everything just got so busy and overwhelming, and I just like I couldn't tell if I was even on my own path anymore, because my life just became obsessively like going into this building and like cycling in and out every day. And my days like started to look like this after a while. I mean, this is like one of the most frustrating things as a designer, because like these are all like interviews and meetings, and it's like, oh yeah, just be the great designer that we have articles about you doing. But you know, just like right here. And then hopefully you still have some energy later in the day to get all that stuff done. And this was what my to-do list started to look like, especially when I was working in product. I pretty much just lived in this ASAP column. And then things would just get added to the top. And I was like, you know, this is just like wishful thinking. And so you're not really doing your best creative work, I think, when you're in this mode. You're basically just like putting out fires all the time, and then hopefully getting to the things that everybody else needs from you. And it's not like sit down and draw a little document picking its nose creative work time anymore. It's like, mad rush time. But things like this were still happening. I was so overwhelmed and busy that I could hardly think, and I couldn't even figure out like if it was wrong. I kept assuming it was myself that was the problem. I'm not strong enough, I'm not tough enough, or whatever. But everyone on the outside was just telling me like, no, you have a dream job, you know, like you. So I felt terrible. I felt bad. I mean, these are more pictures from that photo shoot. Luckily, I got to art direct the photo shoot myself, so I was being a little bit sarcastic, maybe. I'm just like, this is great, you guys, right? This is totally fine? This is fine? This is fine? But on the inside, I was like this weird, sad little cube guy, and my tears were fueling the building that I worked in. Tears. So what do you do when you realize that you're a sad cube person whose tears are fueling the business that you're working in? I think the first thing that we try to do is we try to look for the way out. We want the next thing so badly that we start to plan our escape. But the problem was that I was too bogged down and busy and vulnerable and guilty and hurt and confused that I didn't know what the hell I wanted my world to look like next. I didn't even know who I was anymore because my identity was all wrapped up in this place that like didn't even really have room for me anymore. So I kept asking myself, like, all right, what's the next step? What's the right next step? Like, what's it gonna be, Linda? And I was waiting for that eureka moment like I had in college when it was just like, go be a designer, do it. Or when I wanted to move to New York. But it just wasn't coming, and I just kept getting more stressed out. And then I went to XOXO, which is a super great conference. I want to see all of you guys there, and girls. And there was a talk that Amit Gupta gave, and it kind of just changed my whole perspective, because he was talking about like his walk through leukemia, and he was talking about changes that you need to make in your life and everything. And suddenly, like, everything kind of shifted in my mind, and I stopped worrying about what the next step was, and I started to focus on the very, very simple thing of just what is wrong right now. So I came to this conclusion that, like, you'll never figure out what's right until you fix the wrong thing. You know, the thing in your life that is, like, fucking everything up, you gotta fix that first. It was time to make some like really brave changes that I had never made before. It didn't have anything to do with anyone else or with Dropbox or with the world not being fair or with me not being tough enough. My world had just kind of become something that I didn't feel like I should be a part of anymore. And instead of swimming against the current and like trying to make it work over and over again and pretending that it would still make me happy, I had to just let go. And the thing is, like, I think we all have that thing that we know we need to change, and we just kind of don't want to because it's kind of hard, but we already know. And so I quit my job with no backup plan. That was pretty deep. So I wanted to give you guys some treats for hanging in there. Of course, there's a hot dog. So I quit my job. I called my mom and I was like, hey Mom, I quit my job. And she's like, what? I was hoping that she would be all supportive and happy for me because she knew like how stressed out and miserable I kind of was. And instead of getting that kind of support, I got the mother who like raised her children on coupons, and we had like no money. And she's like, what? What are you talking about? But like eventually she came around to my side, and I ended up starting freelancing, and I didn't lose all my teeth, and everything was okay. I spent some time traveling and just hanging out with friends and trying to figure it out. And the thing is, like, I'm so glad that I did that because I feel like I had a few months worth of sifting through baggage that I had to deal with. And once I did all that, I like met these awesome people at Wayno. My boss is here right now. Thanks for coming out. And I felt like I had finally found a world that I could actually fit in. And I felt like if I had just kind of rushed into the next thing, that I would have created another world that looked exactly like this, and it would have just kept repeating itself over and over and over again. So I mean, that's my story of change, and it's my most recent super huge change, and it was terrifying, and I'd be happy to talk to any of you about it more. And I think we have a Q&A after this, so that's it.